Hey yo, everyone! As is tradition, Jeff Keighley took to YouTube earlier this week to announce the annual Game Awards nominees. Not gonna lie, this has been a freaking great year for gaming. So, of course, with so many great games and only so many nomination spots, some of these gems are gonna get left out. And that sucks, it really does. There are so many incredible games this year that are deserving of our recognition, so I completely understand if some fans out there feel a bit robbed that their favorite game didn't get a nomination. Most of the internet understands that, but there is a vocal minority that is crying foul. So today, let's dive into how the Game Awards actually works and whether or not there is any credibility to the idea that the show is rigged. As always, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Alright, let's get it. Alrighty, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this thing. Earlier this week, former esports gamer turned live streamer Shroud has claimed that the Game Awards are, and always have been, rigged. Shroud believes that Arc Raiders, that new extraction shooter that has taken the gaming community by storm, should have been nominated for Game of the Year over other titles, such as Clair Obscure's Expedition 33 and Donkey Kong Bonanza. He believes that, quote, the world is just not ready for AI in video games. Not yet, but hey, at least they nominated it for something. I genuinely thought they wouldn't nominate it for anything because they were scared to get backlash, end quote. This is, of course, referencing Arc Raiders' controversial implementation of AI voice lines in the game. He goes on to say that, quote, once again, another year, another rigged year, end quote. Okay, guys, we really gotta stop saying things are rigged just because they don't go our way. Come on. Shroud has now since turned his attention to the competition, like Donkey Kong Bonanza. He said, quote, imagine Donkey Kong. If Donkey Kong would win, this award show is just chalked, you know? Who the f*** is playing Donkey Kong Bonanza? Nobody's playing Donkey Kong Bonanza. Nobody. Alright, I'm not even really going to address that because it feels like rage bait and it's stupid and a waste of all of our time. Instead, I want to talk about his claims about the Game Awards being rigged. Is he onto something here? No? Turns out he is onto absolutely nothing. But I think that it's still an interesting topic and worth delving into further. The Game Awards seem to be drawing in more viewers each and every year, so I think it's fair for fans to ask who the voting jury is and how the overall voting process works. So, when the Game Awards first started back in 2014, the voting jury was made up of just 28 media members. These were mostly just video game journalists and industry vets, including writers from the Associated Press, Entertainment Weekly, Game Informer, The Guardian, PC Gamer, IGN, Kotaku, and a bunch more. As the show increased in popularity and scale, so has the voting jury. In 2025, the jury now consists of over 100 members and includes not only industry journalists, but other major media outlets such as NPR, Rolling Stone, Variety, GameRanks, Eurogamer, and a whole lot more. Essentially, if you are a credited video game / media critic, or at least have some sort of respectable history and contribution to the industry, you got a shot to be selected as part of the jury. Unlike other award shows, the Game Awards takes votes from outlets and organizations rather than individuals. This is because the amount of video games released each year and the time required to adequately review them would be too much for just one person to handle. So basically, each media outlet picks their game nominees internally and then submits them. So the Game Awards is just getting the collective opinion of the entire outlet. Now, all of these members come from over 30 different countries from all across the globe, so I think it's a pretty fair representation of the video game industry as a whole. Something interesting to note though, Jeff Keighley, despite being the host and founder of the show, is actually not a member of the voting jury. So now that we've established who the voting jury is, let's talk about their role in the actual voting process. According to the TGA website, the nominees for the Game Awards are selected by the voting jury. Now, depending on the category, such as esports or innovation and accessibility, they might bring in some specialized voters who have more of an expertise on the topic. Each voting member will be given a confidential, unranked ballot where they and their editorial staff will list out their top 5 nominees for each category. In terms of a tie, some categories might feature up to 6 or 7 nominees. So, for example, if I was given a ballot, which hopefully one day I will, and we're looking at the best multiplayer category, I could nominate games like Battlefield 6, Arc Raiders, Rematch, Dying Light the Beast, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. All of the ballots are then added up, and the top 5 most voted on games will be nominated for their respective category. So, in terms of best multiplayer, Battlefield 6 and Arc Raiders would make the cut, but the other 3 that I voted for didn't have enough votes from the other outlets, so they would not be nominated. Now, here's where the actual voting comes into place. Once the nominees have been selected, winners are decided by adding up a combination of fan voting and jury voting. It's a bit different than the other traditional award shows. Events such as the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Awards are voted upon by selected individuals within their respective industry. Other shows, like the Critics' Choice Awards and Golden Globes, are voted upon by professional journalists and critics. So, the Game Awards is more like the latter than the former, but not exclusively, as fans of the gaming community can also make their voice heard.
Read it, boy.
The official voting jury makes up 90% of the count, and the fan voting accounts for the remaining 10%. So now, you're probably asking yourself, why don't they just make it so the fan count is how the awards are actually measured and given out? Why do we need a voting jury instead of just the popular vote? Well, a couple different things here. For one, unlike TV or film, video games can be platform exclusive, which means that some people just won't have access to certain games that could be deserving of the award. That puts games like Death Stranding 2, which is currently a PlayStation 5 exclusive, at a disadvantage since it's competing with multi-platform games like Hollow Knight Silksong. On top of that, I think we need to be honest with ourselves. The gaming community is a very close-knit one, which I love. It can be very wholesome at times, but people tend to migrate towards other people with similar opinions. I think that leaving the vote to just the fans would allow certain communities, whether that be a popular subreddit or Twitch streamer, to socially engineer a win for a game they like. This would almost certainly be taken advantage of too. Like, imagine, for example, if Nintendo wanted to sway influence in the industry and offered $100,000 to a popular streamer to promote Donkey Kong as Game of the Year. I think that rabbit hole would just result in the show losing a bunch of authenticity and credibility. Plus, they already introduced the Player's Voice Award back in 2019, and that one is completely fan voted. But that's essentially how the Game Awards work. I also got a couple of interesting tidbits that I think you guys might like, such as the eligibility rules. This year, the cutoff date is November 21st, so any game that has come out between last year's cutoff date of November 22nd and this year's cutoff date of November 21st will be eligible. That means games like Metroid Prime 4 won't be considered for any accolades this year, and games like Indiana Jones and The Great Circle, which came out last December, is being nominated for awards this year in 2025. Another commonly asked question is whether or not DLC, remakes, or remasters are considered for any awards. I've talked about this topic in the past and have some strong opinions about it, but the Game Awards say they aim to recognize the best creative and technical work each year, regardless of their format. So that means expansion packs, DLC, new game seasons, and remasters and remakes are all eligible for awards if the voting jury deems them worthy. Sounds like they just want to recognize the best gaming experiences of the year, however they may come packaged. Which is fine, I respect that, I do. I just think we should maybe add a new category for that type of content, since there are a ton of brand new games every year that deserve the spotlight a bit more, in my opinion. In terms of just general biases that the show might have, I completely understand people's skepticism. After all, the Game Awards is funded and sponsored by some companies who may have a game nominated at the show. On the TGA website, they go into further detail explaining that no, there is no connection between sponsors and the voting process. For the most part, all of the media outlets are unaware of the show's format each year and who will or won't be sponsoring it. On top of that, all of the voting members, including the advisory board and Jeff Keighley, find out the winners of each category in real time. They don't reveal the winners before the ceremony to anyone, and there is no exceptions to that. And now, one last thing that actually does deserve some criticism. A lot of the other award shows normally consist of thousands, if not tens of thousands of voters. Obviously, that would be a lot of numbers to crunch and not a lot of time to do so, as there are only a few weeks separating the ceremony from the nomination reveal. So, shows like the Oscars, for example, introduce third parties like PwC before the event. PwC, short for PricewaterhouseCoopers, is an accounting firm that tabulates all of the voting for the Academy. These are the guys that are sifting through all the votes and verifying the authenticity of each ballot. Their job is to make sure there are no missed votes or duplicates and that the end result is accurate and fair. The Game Awards, however, only consists of a little over 100 voting members, so when the fine folks over at Polygon asked who tabulates all of the press and public voting ballots, they were a bit disappointed when Jeff Keighley and the advisory board declined to comment. Apparently, quote, Polygon has reached out to representatives for the show multiple times to ask who tabulates the tens of thousands of votes that decide or influence certain awards, but we have not received a response, end quote. So yeah, I don't like that, not one bit. The rest of the show makes sense to me, and how the voting works, I'm completely on board with it, but I think that we, the fans and the viewers, deserve to know who is actually counting and adding up the votes. It'd be nice if it was an outside party, like what the Oscars do, but for such a small number of voters, I would understand if they just did it internally also. Either way, I think that information should be shared with the public so they can form their own opinion. If it turns out to just be internal and is somehow actually rigged, then Shroud, I apologize because I was clearly wrong. But until then, I'm going to assume that it is not rigged, so you can suck my balls because Donkey Kong Bonanza is great. I'm just playing. But that's essentially how the Game Awards work. Are they rigged? No, I don't think so. I guess if you really want to throw a fit because your favorite game wasn't nominated for Game of the Year, then I'm sure you could find an argument. It just won't be with me. In my opinion, all of the games that were nominated are deserving of the award, and there are a bunch of games that didn't get nominated that also deserve the recognition. It's been a great year for us gamers, which means someone is just naturally going to get left out. This is a good problem to have. Hopefully everyone's favorite game this year gets some sort of recognition, but if it doesn't, just remember, who really cares? As long as you enjoyed it, that's all that really matters. Instead of ripping on other people's favorite games, just enjoy your favorite and be happy that it came out this year. Besides, the Game Awards is basically just a big promo for upcoming titles anyway. And that sick-ass orchestra. But now I want to know what you guys think. Are you going to tune into the Game Awards this year? What was your favorite game? Any big snubs you'd like to mention? I cannot believe that Sonic the Hedgehog 3 didn't get nominated for Best Adaptation. Now that is something to actually be upset about. Anyway, I would love to hear all of your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It means a lot. I appreciate you guys as always, and I'll catch you in the next one.